I'm Shelly Burton, and welcome to Finding Greatness. On today's show, we're going to be interviewing a remarkable young man, Michel Chikwanine, whose travels have brought him from Congo to Canada. In Congo, he was a former child soldier for a rebel group into which he was abducted, and now, today, is a motivational speaker, having shared the stage with notable figures like the Dalai Lama. Today, we're going to be learning more about Michel's journey and what he has learned on the path to healing. So thanks for joining us today. Michel, you have a remarkable story. You're absolutely an example of the power of the human spirit to overcome. And could you just share about your journey from Congo to Canada?
My journey from Congo, it's a pretty long journey for myself, but my journey starts off growing up in a little town in the eastern part of the country called Beni. And Beni is in a province called South Kivu, so not on the border of Congo and Uganda, so it wasn't far away from there as well. But I grew up in a huge family. My dad, for example, had 50 brothers and sisters.
Oh my goodness.
And a huge family, so I had a lot of cousins, a lot of aunts and uncles. And in my family, my mom and my dad had 3 daughters, 2 older ones, I was the middle one, and then there was a younger sister. So I was the only male in the family, and that was a little bit of a challenge sometimes. But my dad was very close to me, so I enjoyed being part of my family in that way. My journey, though, as a kid starts off with me being a little bit of a troublemaker. Since I was the only boy, I got the attention from my mom and dad a lot of the times. So in that way, I kind of tried to rebel a little. So as a little kid, I tried to push buttons as much as I could. And one of the things that my parents had is they loved rules in my house. And one of the biggest rules they had in my house was everyone had to be home before 6 p.m. But as a kid, I'd go to school, school started at 7 a.m. and ended around 5 p.m. And by the time you walk from school, it was around, an hour walking from school back to home. But instead of going straight from school to home, I usually went, and played soccer instead. And one morning I was getting ready to go to school, and my dad reinforced the rule, and he said, you have to be home before 6 p.m. today. So that day I went to school thinking, it's just my dad talking that way. So I went to school, and as the bell rang that day, all the kids were running back home. And I'm sitting on my desk thinking, should I go home and be daddy's good boy, or should I go play soccer and have fun instead? And at 5 years old, sitting on my desk in school, I made the choice that I'm sure a lot of kids would have made. I looked at the front door of school and I ran straight to the soccer field to go play soccer with my friends. And unfortunately, during that period, as I was playing, these army trucks with soldiers came to the soccer field, and they started rounding up all the kids, and they put us into a truck and took us to one of the rebel camps where we were forced to become child soldiers. And part of the initiation of becoming a child soldier is they cut my left wrist, and they started putting something called brown. It's a mixture of cocaine and gunpowder. And this was in a way supposed to make you feel a little bit crazy, because as a kid you have this different substance in your body, and they'd wrap it with bandage so I wouldn't bleed. And then they blindfolded me and forced me to hold an AK-47, which at that time was so heavy for me to lift that one of the rebel commanders helped me lift it, and they put it on my hand on the trigger, and they forced me to pull it. And as they took off the blindfold, I remember looking at my right hand, and there was blood dripping from it. I was wearing a white shirt, and there was blood dripping from it too. And in front of me, I saw my best friend Kevin, who was 12 and I was 5, and they forced me to kill my best friend as a way of being initiated into an army. And for 2 weeks, I was put through this training, as they called it, where they'd put a kid in front of you and you're forced to kill them, or they'd give you a knife and they force you to stab a banana tree. And this was in a way to desensitize you from killing and train you how to kill as well. So for 2 weeks I went through this training, and after 2 weeks we were told that we're going over to a village that had food and gun supplies that we needed to take over. And we were taken to this village, where as the kids were running towards the village, the younger kids were put at the very front.
And what's going through your mind at that time when that's happening?
I think at that time I remember feeling fear. There's a lot of fear, especially because as a kid you don't really know where you are. I mean, it was this strange place with a lot of strange people you've never met. But for 2 weeks they're I guess brainwashing you, telling you some of the things they would say was, your family will never take you back. We are your only family. And constantly they'd repeat this thing so that you'd forget that you have your own community, so that you'd keep with them.
Yeah.
But not just a fear of them as well, but also a fear of that my dad would punish me for not being home at 6 p.m. So there were these like two
So you're
contrasting
living in two
fears.
worlds
Yeah.
at the same. Okay, sorry. So continue.
Yeah.
You're on the front lines.
So we're put at the front lines, and one of the things that I think I've now understood was the reason why they put the younger kids at the very front was so that they were being used as targets. So that if there were soldiers on the other side, they'd look at a child, they wouldn't kill the child, right? Because as an adult, it's a kid. But that child was, the reason why they're put there was so that the younger kids could actually shoot all the soldiers on the other side. Now, when all the other kids were running towards the village, I remember, again, this fear of my dad punishing me for not being home at 6 p.m. It was over. This fear of my dad was much more than the fear of being with these rebel soldiers.
Yeah.
So I started trying to find a way to run home. And I remember looking to my right as the kids are running towards the village, and there's a clearing. And I ran as fast as I could, in fear that these soldiers are going to look at me. I did not look back, and I just kept running as fast as I could. And for 3 days and 3 nights, I ran through this jungle, and I had no idea where I was going. I was so afraid that, you know, a lion or something would eat me, right? But I just knew that I had to be home. So
and you just followed your guidance where it told you to go.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just kept running, and somehow, as I'm running through this jungle for 3 days, I remember hearing these sounds. And at first, it was the sounds of these men yelling and screaming, and these women also yelling. And at first, I thought that the rebel soldiers had chased me and that they'd caught up to me. So I laid in the grass and I waited for them to pass by, but the sounds were still there. The trucks were still passing by, but nobody was walking towards me. So I crawled through the grass just trying to follow the sound. And I opened the grass in front of me, and I looked at the store next to me, and I recognized the store. And in that moment, I got so excited and just ran towards it, screaming for my dad, hoping that he would be there. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't my dad that was there to greet me. Instead, it was the store owner. But the store owner recognized me, and he had heard that I'd disappeared. So, you know, in that moment, I looked at him and I saw a little bit of hope that I'm finally back. That, you know, the rebel soldiers were chasing me.